What would you do if your whole world was falling apart and no one came to help? What if you had to carry all the weight alone, with 3 children looking at you, waiting for answers you could not give? I often asked myself these questions. My name is Elena Rossi, and this is the story of how I almost lost everything, but then found hope in the most unexpected place. I was 33 years old, and I lived in Chicago with my 3 children. Isabella was 9, Lena was 6, and Lucas was 11. They were the reason I kept breathing every day. I had no one else in my life. My husband had left years ago, when Lena was only a baby. He walked away without looking back, and he never returned. There were no calls, no letters, and no money. From that day, it was only me and the children. I promised myself that I would never let them feel abandoned, even if I was tired, broken, or afraid. Before I go further, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to fight for your family with everything you have? I would love to know your answer. My life was not easy. I did not come from a rich family. I did not have a college degree. When I was young, I had dreams, but most of them died when I became a single mother. I worked as a cleaner in offices during the night, and sometimes I worked as a helper in a small cafe during the day. My body was tired all the time, and sleep became a luxury. But the bills never stopped. The rent had to be paid, food had to be bought, shoes had to be replaced. There was no one else to do it. I lived in a very small apartment. It had 2 small bedrooms, one for the children and one for me. The paint on the walls was old and peeling. The heating often broke during winter, and the windows let the cold air in. Still, it was a roof over our heads, and I was thankful for it. At night, after finishing my cleaning shift, I often returned home with sore feet. I would walk quietly into the room where my children were sleeping. I would stand beside their beds, looking at their peaceful faces, and whisper promises they could not hear. I told them that I loved them, that I would never give up, and that somehow, one day, I would give them a better life. But life had its own plans. One evening in December, after finishing my cafe shift, I suddenly felt dizzy while waiting for the bus. My vision blurred, my legs weakened, and before I could call anyone, I collapsed onto the cold ground. I woke up hours later in a hospital bed. The white light above me was sharp, and I smelled medicine all around me. A nurse stood near my bed, writing something on a paper. I tried to sit up, but my head was heavy, and my body refused to move. The first thought in my mind was not about myself. It was about my children. I tried to speak, but my voice was weak. "Isabella, Lena, Lucas," I whispered. The nurse came closer and touched my arm. "Your children are safe," she said softly. "Someone called the police when you fainted, and your children were taken home by a neighbor. Do not worry, they are fine." Relief washed over me. But it was followed by fear. If I could not work, how would I take care of them? The doctor came later and explained. My body was exhausted. I had pushed myself too hard for too many months without rest, without proper food, and without enough sleep. My blood pressure was low, and I needed to stay in the hospital for several days. The doctor warned me that if I continued living like this, my health would only get worse. I listened, but in my heart I felt panic. How could I rest when I had rent to pay in 2 weeks? How could I stay in a hospital bed when my children needed food, clothes, and warmth? That night, alone in the hospital room, I cried silently. I was ashamed of my weakness. I felt I had failed as a mother. My children had no father, and now their mother was lying in a hospital bed, unable to work. I thought of Isabella's birthday coming in 2 months. I thought of Lena's winter coat, already too small for her growing body. I thought of Lucas, who wanted to join a football team at school, but knew I could not afford the fee. Each thought stabbed me deeper, until I buried my face in the pillow and let my tears fall. The next day, the hospital gave me the bill. My heart sank when I saw the amount. I could not even pay half of it. And because I had collapsed on the job, the cafe owner said he could not keep me. My only source of income was gone. When I called my landlord to explain, he was cold and harsh. He told me that if I could not pay rent on time, he would have to ask us to leave. I held the phone tightly, shaking with fear. Where would we go? What would happen to my children? In the hospital, I tried to hide my feelings from them. When Isabella, Lena, and Lucas visited, I smiled and told them everything would be fine. I touched their hands, kissed their cheeks, and pretended to be strong. But inside, I was breaking. Every night, when they went home with a neighbor, I cried again. I prayed for a miracle, though I did not believe miracles could happen for people like me. Then something unexpected began to happen. One of the nurses who often checked on me had told her sister about my story. The sister wrote about me on social media. Slowly, people began to read it. They saw pictures of my 3 children. They read about my struggles. Strangers started leaving messages of support. Some even asked if they could send help. At first, I did not believe it. Why would anyone care about me? Why would they want to help someone they had never met? But within a few days, small donations started arriving. $10, $20, even $50 from someone I did not know. I cried every time I saw a message. My children, too, were shocked. Lucas asked me, "Mama, why are people helping us? They do not even know us." I told him, because sometimes kindness comes from places we do not expect. Still, even with those small donations, the hospital bill was far too high. I was grateful, but I knew it was not enough. One evening, while I was resting, my phone rang. The voice on the other side was deep and calm. "Mrs. Rossi?" the man asked. I hesitated, then said yes. "My name is Alex Carter," he continued. "I heard about your story. I would like to meet you." My heart raced. I did not know who he was or what he wanted. I asked him why, and he only answered, "Because I want to help." I lay there, staring at the phone in my hand, unsure what to believe. Was this real, or was someone playing a cruel game? I had no strength for more disappointment, but something in his voice felt honest. I decided to wait and see. I did not know then that this call would change everything. The next morning, I was still thinking about that phone call. The name Alex Carter echoed in my mind again and again. I did not know him. I did not know where he came from or why he cared about me. But his voice stayed with me, calm and steady, like someone who had made a decision and would not change it. Still, I was cautious. My life had taught me not to trust too easily. Later that afternoon, while my children sat on the hospital bed with me, the door opened. A man walked in with a quiet smile. He looked to be in his mid-30s, dressed simply but neatly. His eyes were kind, and there was something gentle about the way he moved, as if he did not want to disturb anyone. My children looked at him with wide eyes. I felt my breath catch in my throat. He introduced himself softly. "I am Alex Carter. Thank you for allowing me to visit." For a moment, I did not know what to say. I simply nodded and tried to sit up straighter, though my body was still weak. He brought a small basket of fruit and some warm clothes for the children. Isabella touched the soft sweater inside and smiled shyly. Lena hid behind me at first, but then peeked out, curious about this stranger. Lucas sat close to me, protective, watching every move Alex made. He sat on the chair beside my bed and spoke in a calm tone. He said he had read about us online. He told me that he grew up in the same city and had known hard times in his own childhood. He said he believed no child should have to suffer hunger or cold when something could be done. His words were simple, but they carried weight. I could not stop the tears from filling my eyes. I thanked him, though my voice trembled. In the days that followed, Alex returned several times. He never came empty-handed. Once he brought books for Lucas, who loved reading but rarely had new ones. Another time, he brought colored pencils and paper for Isabella and Lena, saying that children should always have the chance to create. Each visit, I felt a mix of gratitude and fear. Gratitude because of his kindness, fear because I wondered what he expected in return. One evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, I finally asked him directly, "Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me and my children?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. His voice was quiet but firm. "Because I can. Because I remember what it felt like when no one cared. And because I believe that every small act of kindness makes the world better." His words struck me deeply. It was as if he was speaking to the wounds I carried inside. Soon after, Alex spoke to the hospital staff. Days later, I learned that my bills had been paid. I stared at the nurse when she told me, unable to believe it. "Who?" I asked again and again, though I already knew. It was Alex. When I tried to thank him, he shook his head. "Do not thank me. Take care of your children. That is enough." But of course, I could not stop thanking him in my heart. When the doctor said I was well enough to leave the hospital, another fear returned. Where would I go? Rent was due, and I had no job. My landlord had already warned me that he would not wait. But before I could even speak of this, Alex appeared again with news. He had spoken with a community group. They had arranged for a temporary home for me and the children until I could find work again. The day we left the hospital, Alex drove us to that place. It was not large, but compared to our small apartment, it felt like a dream. The walls were freshly painted, the rooms were warm, and there was enough space for the children to play. Isabella ran from room to room with excitement. Lena clapped her hands and laughed. Lucas stood silently for a while, then turned to me and whispered, "Mama, is this really ours?" I hugged him tightly and said, "Yes, for now it is ours." For the first time in months, I slept without fear that night. I lay in the new bed, my children close by, and I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, life was giving us another chance. But my journey was not over. I still needed a way to provide for my children. I could not depend on charity forever. I began looking for work again. I cleaned houses for a few hours each day, though my body was still weak. It was not enough to cover all expenses, but it gave me back a small sense of dignity. One afternoon, Alex visited and asked me a question I did not expect. "Elena, if you could do anything, if you could build a better life, what would you want to do?" I hesitated. I had not thought about my own dreams in many years. My life was about survival, not dreams. but as he looked at me with patient eyes, something inside me stirred. Slowly, I said, "I would like to open a small bakery. I have always loved baking bread and cakes. I used to imagine having my own shop one day, where people could come for something warm and sweet." Alex listened carefully, then smiled. "Then maybe we can make that happen." I laughed nervously. "No, that is impossible. I can barely pay for food." But he did not laugh. Instead, he told me about a small grant program that helped single parents start small businesses. He said he would help me apply. Weeks passed, and with his support, I completed the forms. I shared my ideas, and to my surprise, the program accepted me. They agreed to give me a small loan and some training. My heart raced when I received the letter. For years, I had only known rejection and struggle. Now, for the first time, I held a paper that promised a chance. With Alex's help, I rented a small shop space. It was not fancy, but it had an oven, shelves, and a counter. My children joined me in cleaning it, painting the walls, and making it feel alive. Isabella loved to decorate signs. Lena drew little flowers on pieces of paper and taped them to the windows. Lucas helped move boxes and carried small bags of flour with pride. We were building something together, as a family. The first day we opened, I was nervous. I wondered if anyone would come. But slowly, neighbors walked in. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. A woman bought cakes for her children. A man bought bread and smiled, saying it reminded him of his childhood. My heart felt light as I gave change and watched people leave with food I had made. That night, I held my children and whispered, "We are starting again. We are building our own future." Alex continued to visit, not as a savior now, but as a friend. He did not want anything in return. He simply wanted to see us grow. He often said, "It is your strength that brought you here, not me," but I knew the truth. Without his kindness, we might still be in the hospital, lost and hopeless. One evening, after closing the shop, I invited him to dinner at our new home. My children were excited. They cooked with me, setting the table with care. Isabella placed flowers in the center. Lena drew another picture, this time of our bakery, with the words, "Thank you, Alex." Lucas quietly practiced what he wanted to say, though he never told me what it was. When Alex arrived, my children ran to him with joy. They hugged him as if he was already part of our family. I stood there, tears in my eyes, watching the scene. I realized then how much he had changed our lives, not only with money or support, but with hope. Hope that we could stand again. Hope that we could dream again. As we sat together that night, eating simple food, I felt a deep gratitude that words could not express. I looked at Alex and thought, this is what a miracle looks like. And though he kept saying that we did not owe him anything, in my heart, I knew I would never forget him. The weeks turned into months, and our bakery slowly became part of the neighborhood. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread filled the street. Customers began to greet us by name. Some stopped by just to talk, even if they did not buy anything. My children helped before and after school. Isabella loved to arrange the cakes on the shelves. Lena always asked if she could give free cookies to the little children who visited. Lucas grew taller and stronger, and he often carried heavy boxes with pride. I could not believe how far we had come. There were still hard days. Sometimes sales were low, and I worried if we could pay the bills. Sometimes my body ached from long hours of standing, baking, and cleaning. but the fear that once followed me every moment had begun to fade. For the first time in many years, I felt that tomorrow might be brighter than today. Alex continued to visit, though not every day. He had his own life and work, but whenever he came, he brought warmth with him. My children adored him. They often waited at the window, asking, "Mama, do you think Alex will come today?" When he did, the whole house seemed lighter. He never made us feel like we owed him anything. He laughed with the children, listened to their stories, and encouraged me to believe in myself. One evening, after closing the bakery, I sat alone at the counter, counting the coins in the register. The numbers were small, but they were honest, earned by my own hands. I thought back to the night I lay in the hospital bed, afraid of losing everything. If someone had told me then that I would one day own a bakery, I would not have believed them. It felt like a dream I had no right to dream. Yet here I was, living it. But life did not stop testing me. One winter storm, the bakery's roof began to leak. Water dripped onto the shelves, and I panicked. Repairs cost money I did not have. For a moment, fear returned, the old fear of losing everything again. I wanted to cry, but then I remembered the lesson I had learned. I was not alone anymore. The community that once helped me was still around me. So I explained to the customers that the bakery needed repairs. To my surprise, many offered to help. One man fixed the pipes for free. Another donated wood. A group of neighbors came on a Saturday to paint the walls again. That day, as I watched them work together, I realized something powerful. My story was no longer about one stranger saving me. It was about how kindness spreads. Alex's first act of help had planted a seed, and now that seed had grown into a tree that gave shade to many. I was part of a circle of kindness, and I promised myself I would keep it alive. Months later, I was invited to speak at a community meeting for single parents. At first, I was shy. I had never spoken to a crowd before. But when I stood in front of them, I told my story with honesty. I spoke about the nights of hunger, the fear of losing my children, the hospital bed, and the miracle of Alex Carter. I saw tears in some eyes. I saw nods of understanding. And when I finished, many parents came to me and said, "Thank you, you gave us hope." That night, when I returned home, I sat quietly by the window while my children slept. The city lights shone in the distance, and the air was cool. I thought about my journey. Pain had shaped me, but it had not destroyed me. Kindness had lifted me when I was sinking. And my children had given me the reason to keep moving. One Sunday evening, Alex joined us again for dinner. We ate together, and afterwards, Isabella brought a small cake she had baked with me earlier. She placed it in front of Alex. On the cake, with uneven but sweet letters, she had written, "Our miracle." Alex looked at it, and his eyes grew wet. He tried to laugh, but his voice shook when he said, "I am no miracle. You are." I shook my head and reached for his hand. "No, Alex. You gave us a chance when no one else did. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You showed my children that kindness still exists in this world. That is a miracle." He grew quiet, and for a moment, the room was filled with silence, broken only by the sound of my children giggling nearby. Now, every morning when I unlock the bakery door, I whisper a prayer of thanks. I thank life for giving me another chance. I thank my children for being my strength. And I thank Alex, the stranger who became a friend, and who reminded me that miracles do not always come with bright lights or magic. Sometimes they come in the form of a person who chooses to care. My life is not perfect. We still face struggles, and the future is never certain. But I no longer live in fear. I live with hope. And every time I see my children smile, I know that we are walking a new path. A path built not only on survival, but on kindness, courage, and love. So when people ask me how I survived, I tell them this: one stranger, one miracle, and a heart that refused to give up. That was enough to change everything. If my story touched your heart, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts and your own stories of kindness. Do not forget to subscribe so you can listen to more emotional English stories. And if you think someone needs hope today, please share this video with them. Your support means more than you know.